Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be starting a brand new series. Well, it's actually not brand new. A lot of people have played this series. But yes, we are going to be playing the Halo series, the entire Halo series. Every single game, from Halo Wars to Halo 1 to Halo 2 to Halo ODST to Halo 3, Halo 4 to Halo 5 to Halo Infinity. Yeah, I've only actually played up to Halo 4, like chronologically order speaking, so I know everything that's gonna happen there. I haven't played Halo 5 or Halo Infinity, so I kind of stopped playing Halo after that. But I do love Halo. It's one of like the first games that I actually really got into. And I actually like read up on the backstory. I read the first 3 books, and they were amazing. And I actually read Halo Harvest, or can't remember what it's called, the Fall Harvest, or something to do with Harvest, which is like just before Halo Wars takes place. And then also Halo. Another book where it's Master Chief trying to take over, trying to capture Covenant ships, and it kind of fails and backfires. But yeah, so anyways, I'm gonna try to explain the Halo story as best I can as we go along it, from all the knowledge I've preserved from my time of playing Halo. So, thankfully, we have the Halo timeline. So, let's see here. January 6th, 2498. Arcadia Colony opens the DRSA. The Deep Space Research Array, designed to research and study extremely high... Stop it. God, I didn't ask for this. Stop auto-scrolling. High gravity events, such as black holes and other areas that exploratory vessels cannot visit directly. The DSRA is eventually destroyed by the Covenant during initial attack on Arcadia in 2531. Yes. Okay. So, let me start by saying who the factions are. So, we the humans, in the early... or like in the late 21st, early 22nd century, we start colonizing our solar system. And then eventually, like, the solar system gets completely overcrowded, of course. And we come up with the Sha Fujikawa drive, which is basically creates a slip space rupture in space and allows ships to travel at much faster rates. So it basically allows humanity then in the 23rd century, 24th century to start colonizing other planets. And so humanity just basically goes on like massive colonization efforts at this point. And then like all of Earth and her colonies start uniting under one government called the United Nations, or the United Earth Government, I think is what it's called. And their military force becomes the UNSC, United Nations Space Command. And the United Nations Space Command was formed originally because the outer human planets were starting to rebel against the human inner planets. They wanted to basically be able to rule themselves and not have to deal with the high taxes of the outer planets. So it's very much kind of like America rebelling against the British, declaring their independence is kind of what it is. And the British formed this massive force called UNSC. So then the UNSC starts to develop the super soldiers in response. And how they did it is they took like, I think it was like 100 well-gifted children that were both gifted in physical and mental aptitude. And they stole them in the middle of the night from their parents and replaced them with flash clones. So the clones would die off early, and the actual children themselves would be conscripted into the UNSC to become these super soldiers. And so they would be raised from the age of 6 to the rest of their lives knowing nothing but war. And they'd also come across these, like, the UNSC would perform all sorts of medical experiments on them as well to enhance their bodies, make their bones bigger, give them all sorts of steroids to increase their muscle mass and reaction timing, and making them more smarter and to be able to see in the dark better. And basically, these kids were called Spartans. It was the Spartan 2 program. And it was headed by a doctor, Dr. Halsey. She was the main drive behind this entire program. She was a civilian doctor who was working with the UNSC. And the UNSC intelligence agency, the ONI. I can't remember what ONI stands for. Office of Naval Intelligence. That's what it is. Office of Naval Intelligence. They're like the CIA, basically. But if the CIA was very, even worse than it is, and, less about protecting humanity and more about protecting the UNSC and keeping the UNSC power in check. So Oni drafted Dr. Halsey and her Spartans into the military. Well, not Dr. Halsey. She's not. She's still a civilian, but her Spartans are in the military and are trained from childhood. And their main purpose is bred specifically to handle the rebels in the outer planet and to squash the rebellion that's going on in the outer planet. However, they haven't gotten much to do before another adversary shows up called the Covenant. Covenant are a conglomerate of different alien races who are all led by really 2 factions in the races. The Sangheli and the Stanchium. The Stanchium are the hierarchs, basically. They lead the Covenant. There are 3 hierarchs that lead the Covenant. The Prophet of Truth, the Prophet of Mercy, and the Prophet of Regret. Actually, no. With each new prophet being introduced into the Covenant hierarchy, it's a different prophet of something. And so by the time the Covenant show up on the human doorstep, they don't even know who the humans are, and the humans have no idea who the Covenant are. So at first contact, the Covenant have been raised by these even more ancient aliens called the Forerunners. The Forerunners have left these artifacts across the entire galaxy, and they're the super advanced race that disappeared from the galaxy for some mysterious reason. And so the Covenant grew up on worlds where Forerunner technology was left behind. And basically, they built an entire religion around the Forerunners. The Forerunners are their gods now, and believe that this technology that was left behind was meant for them to use. And so they start going out into the galaxy searching for every scrap of Forerunner technology that they can. Now, whenever they come across the humans for the very first time, their Forerunner technology detector has detected. So this all happens on planet Harvest, way out in the outer colonies. The Harvest is the first contact point of humans and Covenant. And the Covenant artifact detector detects that the humans have all it's just pinging off the scales. Every human has a ping for Forerunner technology. There's a reason for that. We'll get to it in the later games. But for right now, all you need to know is the Covenant see the humans have all this Forerunner technology. And so the hierarchs, Prophet of Truth, Prophet of Mercy, and Prophet of Regret, who are in charge of the Covenant at this point in time, they see this, and they see it as a threat to their religion, because the Covenant thought they were the inheritors of the Forerunner technology. They thought they were the ones to take over the galaxy and ascend to godhood. But then here are the humans who, like, clearly have way more Forerunner technology than the Covenant ever could. Now, on the human side, we haven't even discovered the Forerunners yet. We know nothing about Forerunner technology. There are indications here and there across several planets that maybe there was like some sort of intelligent species at some point in time that developed stuff, but there's no like correlation to say that it was Forerunner. So the humans haven't discovered the Forerunners yet. So how could the humans possibly have all this Forerunner technology if they don't know of for the Forerunners yet? And in short description, there's this whole back history about the humans and the Forerunners, and the humans are kind of like the chosen inheritors of the galaxy. They're supposed to be the chosen inheritors of the galaxy. So that's why the Forerunner technology that the Covenant are using to look for Forerunner technology, like the little Forerunner map, is just pinging off the charts with the humans, because the humans are reading as Forerunners themselves, but they're not. And their like technology is reading as very Forerunner-esque, and it isn't. So the prophets declare this as heresy to the entire Covenant, that the humans are heretics for saying, like, for having all this Forerunner technology. And that's a huge threat to their religion, because, you know, religious reasons, because religion is dumb and stupid. And so the hierarchs declare war on the entire human race at Harvest. There's like negotiation talks at Harvest, you know, like there was an accidental like humans and Covenant shot each other, but they didn't really mean to, you know. It's just sort of like a what the hell is that, sort of like just scared people shooting at each other. And then so that's where the Covenant send a ship to investigate more. And the ship basically sends down a delegation to the Harvest government. They also blocked the communications from Harvest, so they couldn't send out anything to the rest of the UNSC saying that they had made first contact with this alien species. So nobody on the outside of Harvest, knew of these aliens approaching. And at the diplomacy meeting, it completely backfires. And the Covenant just start like rampaging the entire planet and start glassing the entire planet. And they do that by like shooting down these giant laser beams from their ship that basically turns everything it touches into glass. And so that's why it's called glassing a planet, is they're just wiping out the face of humanity from the entire planet, wiping out the existence that they were ever there. And they also leave behind a message for the humans. Your destruction is the will of the gods, and we are their instruments. And that's basically the declaration of war from the Covenant to the humans. Now, that was in 2525, I believe, or 2524. So this is 2498. This is whenever the human rebellions are going on. So if we scroll ahead a little bit, 2506, Project Orion. The original Spartan project, the first attempt by colonial military administration to create and train teams of super soldiers for covert military options in the outer colonies, is deactivated. Though the Spartans are effective, their abilities fall short of original expectations, and they are far too expensive to develop and field. The soldiers in the program are reassigned to various special operations units. Okay, so Project Orion is the original Spartan program, and that's where they were trying to take adult humans who were already in the military, who were volunteering to become Spartans. But it was too expensive with not enough gain because like the chemicals and everything and the enhanced physical enhancements, it was too hard to do on a body that had already gone through puberty. And so the body was already developed by that point. And Sergeant Johnson, who we come across later, he was there at first contact on Harvest, but he was also one of the members of Project Orion. So you come across Sergeant Johnson later on in the other Halos, but he's a total badass, basically. So that's where Project Orion comes into play. That's all you need to know about that. And then we come to 17th of August, 2517. Dr. Catherine Halsey and her aide, Dr. Lieutenant Jacob Keyes, covertly inspect one of the first test subjects for the mysterious Spartan 2 project. The prospective candidate, a 6-year-old child named John, is ideal for the project. Halsey arranges for the subject to be covertly conscripted. So John becomes Spartan 117, the Master Chief. You'll find that out in these later entries, but Spartan 117, Master Chief, John, is chosen to be the leader of all the Spartans. He is like he's not the strongest Spartan, he's not the fastest Spartan, he's not the smartest Spartan. He's the luckiest Spartan, is what he is. And that's why he was chosen, basically. If you can imagine. And then 23 September 2517. Halsey's Spartan 2 project begins, with primary research conducted on the planet Reach and the Epsilon Eridani system. 75 children of both sexes are subjected to an intense program of physical and mental retraining and technological augmentation, including reinforced skeletal structure and improved musculature. So this is what I was talking about before. The Spartans are going through their augmentations and through their training as kids, which is pretty horrible. It's like the last resort for the UNSC to try to gain control of the outer planets. And so Reach is like Earth 2.0, kind of. It's the main military base for the UNSC. It's where most of the ships come from. It's where most of the high-level military training goes. It's where ONI is based, the Office of Naval Intelligence. So Reach is a very important planet to the UNSC. And so that's where the children are taken there to Planet Reach for retraining. Okay. 20th of July, 2520. Captain Alexander, the last civilian captain of Spirit of Fire, retires from active duty at the conclusion of the Barrett mission. The ship is requisitioned by the UNSC and scheduled for refit. So the Spirit of Fire is the main ship we'll be on for Halo Wars, the game that we're going to play now. And then we got September 1st, 2520. Spirit of Fire completes an extensive refit at the Reach orbital shipyards before entering active military duty as a ground support vessel, initially detailed with providing ground support for Operation Trebuchet. Now, Operation Trebuchet is the operation to fight back against the rebel incursions in the outer planets and take out their leaders, basically. Which is why the Spartan 2s are being developed. They're not developed for, like, mass army prevention. They're developed for, like, specific target insertion and assassinations, basically. They're basically like becoming pro-assassin, military assassins, kind of. And So this is a covenant history. Edict of the Office of the High Prophet of Restraint. It is known the Kigyar ship Petilus has brought forth an unclean being's corpse. Here now, all Kigyar vessels are to be searched. Let faithful Sangheli lead teams of Ungoi to all Kigyar ships and seek further evidence of the unclean. It is done. So, Kigyar are known as jackals to humans. They're the jackal race. Sangheli are the elites, and Ungoi are the grunts. You'll find out who they are as we play. But to those who have already played Halo, that's a translation of the species. Edict of the Office of High Prophet of Tolerance. This is still Covenant. Hear now that 500 teams are to be formed to study the language of the unclean. Each team consists... Stop it. Come on. Each team consists of the most clever and most educated Ungoi and Sangheli. These teams speak only the unclean language among themselves, the unclean language to be taught to all military strike teams, that the foes shall be vulnerable. So this is their, interaction with the Covenant's first contact with humans. The Covenant's first contact with humans was actually before the humans' first contact with the Covenant. They discovered a ship out in space, and it was like a freighter ship controlled by one man, and they took it over and, took the body, I guess. And that's the unclean. We, the humans, are the unclean. So that's where they're starting to, learn about these unclean humans and whatnot. So this is 25-24. Okay, so this is just before they attack Harvest. Excerpt from The Punished Deeds, Volume 3. The youngest of the new prophets, Regret, ascended by manipulating and blackmailing those around him. Regret was one of the prophets who visited the Oracle, an ancient AI, where it was learned that the humans were somehow connected to the Forerunner race, and that the very foundation of Covenant belief was flawed. Their decision to eradicate humanity to hide these facts is debated to this day. Yeah, so that's where the Covenant, the current leaders of the Covenant, Prophet of Regret, Truth, and Mercy, basically rose to power by usurping the power. They kind of politically backstabbed their former people and threw them out of office, kind of. It's just basically they usurped. So, Edict of the Office of the High Prophet of Truth. All within the Covenant, hear now and obey. Weapons and ships of war to descend upon the inhabited world of Epsilon Indi. Strike with all force. No intelligent survivors may remain, upon severest penalty. So that's the prophets declaring war on the humans. February 3rd, 2525. Contact with the agricultural colony Harvest is lost. Initial attempts to re-establish contact fail. The worst is feared. Meanwhile, in orbiting Oni facilities near Reach, surgical procedures to augment the Spartan 2 candidates are about to begin. Many candidates will wash out, dead or crippled by the process. Yeah, so half of the Spartans will either die or become so crippled that they can no longer serve on the front lines, but they will serve as Oni intelligence, basically analyzing stuff and providing tactical feedback and all that. So the rest of this, so basically the Spartan program is cut down by half at this point. And they're only teenagers at this point still. So, excerpt from the Punished Deeds, Volume 3. This new arbiter did not fear death, but even he was afraid of what was inside the relics of the ancients. Before he entered a relic, he would send in a squad of Ungoi to check for any signs of danger. If all was clear, they would live. But at the slightest sign of trouble, the arbiter would detonate plasma bombs attached to the methane tanks. Nice, arbiter. So yes, there is a new arbiter of the Covenant at this point. The arbiter, before he was an arbiter, he was actually a great military leader within the Covenant, and he was very faithful in leading against the Grunt rebellions and other uprisings. So the Covenant is made up of elites, grunts, jackals, the Sanchium, and also the engineers. Can't remember what their race is called. And the brutes. Brutes and hunters. That's it. Also, something I learned from reading the Contact Harvest. That's what the book is called. After reading Contact Harvest, something else I learned is the why do I keep forgetting their name? They're not brutes. They're the big guys with the shields and the giant cannons mounted on their arms. You know who I'm talking about. I just said their name and I'm getting a memory block. But anyways, they aren't actually a single being, but a bunch of worms, like giant worms that basically come together to make a colony. And that's why there are two of them at all times, because the two make a colony and they perform like a bond between each other. And so they all work in unison. So that's who those guys are. The not the brutes, but the giant guys with shields. You know who I'm talking about. But yeah, anyway, so the current arbiter, before he was an arbiter, he was fighting in the rebellions and serving the Covenant faithfully and believed in their religion heavily. But then he tried to overthrow his own warlord, and he failed. That was his greatest crime, was that he failed. And so he was sent to prison for that, where he created another uprising of the prisoners, and that was squashed again. But the prophets saw potential in him, so they didn't kill him. They turned him into an arbiter. And an arbiter, you may be wondering, is basically just the right hand of the Covenant leaders. They're the ones that do the prophet's will, specifically for the prophets. And so they're like the super agent. And as far as I know, there's only one arbiter at any given time. So that is who the current arbiter is. And so he's ordered to go out and look for Covenant artifacts. Or not Covenant, Forerunner artifacts. Now, April 20th, 2525, contact with the scout ship Argo, sent to investigate the problem on Harvest, is lost. A larger armed battle group is prepared in response. Yes, so the Outer Worlds, UNSC, still have no idea why Harvest has lost all contact, and so they send a scout ship to investigate, and that scout ship goes dark too. Excerpt from the Punished Deeds, Volume 3. The new arbiter was almost immediately tested. An installation of the ancients near remnants of a massive space installation that was thought to contain a key, an object that was believed could be used to activate technology. The installation was heavily defended by a growing faction of elites who did not agree with the ways of the new prophets. The arbiter killed them in a battle that raged for days. A key was never found, but the dissident movement was silenced. Yes. Okay. October 7th, 2525. Battle Group D arrives at Harvest and engages the Covenant, but it's forced to jump away back to Reach after 2 of its 3 ships are destroyed by a single Covenant vessel. An audio-only message was transmitted by the Covenant during this engagement. Your destruction is the will of the gods, and we are their instruments. It is believed that because the message was transmitted in English, the Covenant have been studying humanity for some time. They actually haven't. It's only been since 2524. So it's only been a year since the Covenant have known about humanity. So they've only been studying human language for a year. But we don't know that. So then, let's see here. It's October 7th. November 1st, 2525. The UNSC military goes on full alert and begins making preparations to move in and retake Harvest. All colonial military administration combat forces are immediately placed under NAVCOM, UNICOM for the duration of the crisis. The Spartan 2 project is accelerated to its final phase, Mjolnir, a new form of powered armor specifically designed for Spartan use. Yes. So the entire rebel military operations are put on hold at this point. So we no longer care about rebel uprising, and we're basically sending all our firepower to destroy the Covenant, defend against the Covenant at this point. All right, November 27th, 2525. All Spartan 2s are transported to the Damascus Materials Testing. Stop auto-scrolling, damn it. To the Damascus Materials Testing Facility on Chi Seti 4, to be equipped with Mjolnir armor. They only have a matter of hours to test suit operation before an alien vessel enters the system and attacks their orbiting support ship. In the ensuing battle, 3 Spartans board the enemy ship and encounter their first Covenant soldiers, capturing an energy shield gauntlet. 1 Spartan is lost in the engagement. Yeah, so John, Kelly, and Sam, those are kind of like... So John becomes the leader at an early age when he's like 10 or so in the training. And at this point, they're still, I think, only like in their early teen years or late teen years. So Sam and Kelly are John's best friends in the program. They were his first team members in the very first military exercise. And that's how they became best friends. Is because they learned how to play as a team after that military exercise. And so that's where like they became his most trusted people, his most go-to people, John's best of the best. And so that's why he chose Sam and Kelly. And he still trusts the other Spartans on an equal level and knows them all and loves them all. But Sam and Kelly are just like one slight notch higher for him. And Sam is the one that dies on board the ship. The Spartans' armor don't have shields at this point, so they're shieldless. Their technologies are state-of-the-art. They also have, it's like power armor, so every movement that they do is enhanced by like 10. So if they were to punch somebody at normal amount, that punch would just basically obliterate that person. And only the Spartans could use the armor, because anybody who didn't have the Spartans' reflex and muscles and bone structure would like become completely crippled because the armor was too powerful. So that's what happens here, is that. And then they eventually escape. Now then, Edict of the Office of the High Prophet of Regret. Here now, the infamy in Chi Seti system, due to lack of faith on the part of the crew of the vessel. Oh, and they also destroyed the ship. The Spartans destroyed the ship from the inside. On the part of the crew of the vessel, unrelenting, a band of unclean were able to board and slay. A science lance is ordered for him to study the captured weapons and armor that mitigate action can be taken in future. Alright. Battle of Harvest, 2526. So this is the first real human battle with the Covenant. This is where, like, it's go time, it's on. This is war. This is the first battle of the war. So, at the Battle of Harvest, Vice Admiral Preston Cole's war fleet, one of the largest ever mobilized, engages the alien warship responsible for the decimation of the colony, scoring a victory. Only Cole's last-minute technical inspiration turns the tide of battle. Upon his return to Earth, Cole is promoted to the rank of Admiral. And so this is where he enacts the Cole Protocol. So after losing, in this battle, he loses 2/3 of his ships trying to fight this one Covenant vessel. And they still managed to kill it at the end, but by just sheer overpowering. And the way they killed it was like everybody fire all at once, because the Covenant shields on the ships just completely outmatch any human ship that is out in existence. So that's why they're so decimated, is the humans couldn't penetrate the Covenant shields on the ships. Only by like completely overwhelming the shields with a single massive salvo of all the ships combined could they kill it. And then two, the Covenant weapons on the ships are also very deadly. They fire torpedoes that they're able to control in space. So they're basically like the missiles to trying to shoot down airplanes in today's technology. And those plasma torpedoes just completely burn through the armor of the human ships. Like, the human ships are built to withstand human guns, not plasma torpedoes. So that's why the human ships just like burn away instantaneously, basically. So Cole enacts the Cole Protocol at this point after returning to Earth. And this is a new protocol for all military that is punishable by death if not followed. And it basically states that upon first contact with a Covenant vessel, any shape or form, if there is Covenant, all ships in the area must completely wipe out their navigational databases and any star charts that they have to prevent the Covenant from finding any more human worlds. And if they are to leave the system, they must first leave on a random trajectory away from human planets, so the Covenant cannot find any human planet, basically. And so that's what the Cole Protocol is. You'll find that be referred to quite a bit. Edict of the Office of High Prophet of Regret. Let the victory of Epsilon Indi be celebrated by fasting and prayer. Ungoy and Kigyar food rations to be eliminated for the next 3 work periods. Sanghili and Juralani to spend 2 rest periods in public prayer. So the Juralani, those are the brutes, I believe. Yes. All attend the public monitors at the sounding of 5 bells to observe the execution of those who failed their duty at the victory. Okay. Who failed their duty at the victory. Yeah, the Covenant are basically like the Russians during World War II. Any sort of retreat is instant death and execution. Any failure is instant death and execution. You're supposed to be perfect in the Covenant, and if you like die in the Covenant, then you're worthless in the eyes of their God. So the 30th of January, 2528, Captain Cutter turns down a command position on board the destroyer class The Prophecy. His decision to stay close to his family prompted an only psychological examination that determined that, while fit to command, his family ties worked against any larger military career. So Captain Cutter is going to become the commanding officer of the Spirit of Fire, which is the main ship we'll be aboard in Halo Wars, the game we're about to play. Okay, so 2528, Incident Report 16-9196-901. Security team called to Juralani Chieftain's quarters at 3rd Bell, 2nd shift. Team arrived at location to find quarters door torn from its frame and 5 chunks of unidentified biological matter in hallway. See attached diagram. Upon inspection, biological matter confirmed as parts of 2 ungoi from Deck 4 kitchens. Chieftain was calm and responsive, stated that delivery of his midday meal was not to specifications. Thorn beast overdone, dipping sauce insufficient. Maintenance crew notified. Official reprimand of D4 kitchen supervisor filed. Yeah, the brutes just kind of walk over the other Covenant forces, especially the grunts. The grunts are at the bottom of the barrel. They get the scraps and nothing but the scraps. And then the jackals are slightly above them, but they too are at the bottom of the barrel. So yeah, that's who the brutes are. Oh, and also I just thought of something. So you may be wondering, if Sergeant Johnson was there at Harvest on first contact, how did he survive? Because he was also there at the delegation for the humans and the brutes. The brutes were the ones at the delegation. It was a brute ship. So obviously him being a badass, he survived the delegation. He had a full platoon of troops with him, so they kind of took the brunt of the fire. And so he escaped there. And then he and his team basically made their way to the space elevator. So Harvest had space elevator that was useful. So Harvest as a planet is one of the UNSC's biggest food producers. It was a garden world for pure food production. And that was going to be Harvest's job, was to produce food. And so the space elevator was constructed to get the food up to space a lot faster, so it could be moved out to the other planets a lot faster. It was a lot more efficient that way. So the space elevator wasn't destroyed yet by the Covenant. It was taken over, but it wasn't destroyed. And so Sergeant Johnson and his team made their way to the space elevator along with some civilians they came across, and managed to escape, take a ship that was still docked at the space elevator and escape. So that's how they survived Harvest. But by the time they got back to the UNSC to report on the Covenant were already made known at that point. So the UNSC was already aware of what was going on by that point. And Sergeant Johnson was on the ground as the Covenant began glassing the main city. Alright, so anyways, 17th of August, 2530. Sergeant Forge incarcerated for assaulting a senior officer. His career would have been over if Admiral Cole had not intervened and seen that the investigation was fair and above board. The senior officer eventually faced a court-martial, and Sergeant Johnson was assigned to the Spirit of Fire in an effort to keep the prior events quiet. Yeah, so Sergeant Forge is also another main character we're about to come across in this game. 18th of August, 2530. Sergeant Forge incarcerated for assaulting a senior officer. His career would have been over if Admiral Cole had not intervened and seen that the investigation was fair and above board. The senior officer eventually faced a court-martial, and Sergeant Johnson was assigned to the Spirit of Fire in an effort to keep the prior events quiet. Yeah, so Sergeant Forge is also Now, 30th of January, 2531. Professor Anders' log, 30th of January. Upon boarding the last gleaming, I was shown my quarters. On the door it read Dr. Anders, the name my mother wanted me to use in my professional career. I cannot abide being reminded of her wishes. This whole cloak and dagger trip has her fingertips all over it. Okay, so Professor Anders is also another main character on this ship in this game. And she and Halsey, Dr. Halsey, who's the head of the Spartan 2 project, they know each other, and everybody knows Dr. Halsey's methods are very crude. And so that's why she's kind of shunned by the entire academic community, because she's working with Oni and her, she's kind of not a good doctor. She's a great doctor from a scientific perspective, but she's a terrible doctor from a humanistic perspective. She basically only sees the numbers and the statistics. She doesn't see the humanity at all. And so Professor Anders and Dr. Halsey both know each other. And Anders is kidnapped by the UNSC and is made this new classified expert, because she discovered some indications of Forerunner technology. She was one of the first ones to start pulling the strings together of these different markings across different planets that appeared to be similar. So she was just now starting to discover the Forerunners, but she doesn't know that the Forerunners exist yet. There's no definitive proof yet. So that's why the Office of Naval Intelligence kidnapped her and forced her to board the Spirit of Fire. So that's where she is now. She's on her way to the Spirit of Fire because the Spirit of Fire has discovered something in orbit around Harvest, after Harvest has been reclaimed. So the Covenant are still on the ground in Harvest, and they're looking for something. So from the Office of the High Prophet of Regret, return as fastest possible speed to the world they know as Harvest. We must learn the secrets inside the Holy Relic before the great journey can continue. Their humans must not be allowed to enter the artifact. We would do whatever we must to deny them access. All must be resolute in this task, or face punishment. So the great journey for the Covenant is basically their ascendance to godhood. That's what the great journey is referring to. Is that once they gain control over all the Forerunner artifacts, then they will become the masters of the galaxy and will become gods in their own right. So February 4th, 2531, the UNSC support ship Spirit of Fire enters orbit around Harvest. While Admiral Cole's fleet is engaged elsewhere, Spirit is sent to Harvest to investigate ongoing Covenant activity in the system and look for survivors from the missing UNSC destroyer, the Prophecy, previously dispatched to Harvest to investigate the same activity. Commanded by Captain Cutter, Spirit has been reassigned by FleetCom. Oni has placed Professor Anders on board to lead the investigation. So there you go. Then the 6th of February, 2531, Professor Anders writes her father what appears to be a detailed analysis of Homer's Odyssey. In fact, it is a coded message detailing her mission to the Harvest and the result of the find there. Oni sensors miss the cipher completely, and the message passes unaltered to her father. Nice. Spirit of Fire holds... So, when the Spirit of Fire comes to Harvest, they find another Covenant destroyer. Or not a Covenant destroyer, they just find Covenant space forces that are, trying to salvage whatever they can on the destroyer. Because the destroyer hasn't enacted the Cole Protocol yet. So that is a high-value asset that needs to be destroyed. And so whenever the Spirit of Fire enters, they automatically go into all hands on deck battle stations and take out the rest of the Covenant forces around the Prophecy, the human destroyer Prophecy, wipe its data core, and rescue whatever survivors are there. Unfortunately, the survivors there, the Prophecy failed due to a radiation leak from their reactor. And so the survivors were blasted with radiation and could not survive, sadly enough. That's where Spirit of Fire holds service for the crew of the Prophecy. The crew roster is red despite objections from ONI personnel. The Prophecy was lost with all hands on a first expedition to Harvest to investigate the Covenant interest in the artifact found near the polar region. Okay. February 9th, 2531. Okay, so this is in the next mission. All right, so we're all caught up now to the very beginning of the very first mission of Halo Wars. The very beginning of the game story of the Halo series. So yeah. Unfortunately, given how long each mission is, I think I might just have to leave this episode here and just say this is the prelude episode, talking about everything leading up to the very first mission of how we got to Halo Wars, how we got to fighting the Covenant, and why the Covenant are attacking us basically, and what they're looking for. So yeah. Without further ado, if you want more details, for sure look up a guide. There are so many guides on YouTube and so many guides on the internet explaining the entire history of Halo. And I highly recommend it. I recommend more reading the books, because the books are absolutely amazing. And they add a ton of emotion and a ton of story to the Halo universe that you don't get to see in the games themselves. So you may just think the Halo games are these shooter games, fighting aliens, save the day, blah, 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 standard, but there's actually a lot of backstory there, a lot that you don't see in the games themselves, and I highly, highly recommend, especially reading the books if you can. If you can't read the books, then I highly recommend looking up a good guide online that can explain it in further depth. I've explained it to the best of my abilities here from the knowledge that I have acquired over the years. And I will continue to expand upon it more and more as I go through the different games. But I'll only be revealing as much as we come across. So that's why I'm not reading the rest of the Halo timeline yet, is because we haven't reached that point yet in the story. So you have to wait. Alright, well, anyways, you guys, that was fun rereading the Halo timeline. I'm gonna have to leave this episode here. Thank you so much for watching. I've been the loving Miss Scarlet Fox. Please be sure to like the video, comment all the comments, subscribe to the channel, all that good shit. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!